Hello there, and welcome to my review and guide to the Crown of Sorrow Destiny 2 raid. Along the way I will be explaining the various mechanics, and also I'm going to give you some helpful tips for beating the raid yourself. And ultimately I'm going to give you my verdict on the raid and compare it to the other raids from Destiny. Now unfortunately the Crown of Sorrow is not a full-size raid. It's more comparable to a raid lair, like a little mini raid. It has one final boss, which is excellent, and it's multi-staged. And it's actually, I think, the saving grace of this raid, the final boss. It's really well done. There is a midsection, a jumping puzzle, and also there's the first part of the raid, which really does a good job of introducing you to the basic mechanic of the raid. The raid takes place aboard the Leviathan, and it starts off in the menagerie. You'll probably recognise the first area. Now I don't know how you feel about these raid lairs, these mini raids. I kind of wish maybe they'd concentrate on just doing full-size raids personally, but they're still great fun and they are high quality. And I think, to be fair to people that haven't got a lot of time to do a full-size raid, they do have their place. Now when me and my fire team first attempted the raid, we got to the first area, saw the green pool, and realised that if you put people in the pool at the start, they would get a buff, the Witch's Blessing, which lasts for about 60 seconds. And once that blessing reaches 0, you then get the Witch's Curse and you die. So then we noticed this purple ball, and we realised that that allowed you to swap the buff. If you've got a person in there with the buff and a person in there without the buff, and you both shoot the ball, the person with the buff will lose it and the person without it will gain it. And what was interesting is that you could actually have someone with the buff shoot the ball from quite far away, and as long as someone was close to the ball, within the circle around the ball, they would get the buff as long as they shoot it as well. And this mechanic is quite important later on for the final boss. In the Leviathan raid we were throwing balls of energy around, and that was fun, but it was nice to get away from that. And this new sort of buff swapping mechanic is really cool. It's quite flexible, and it means that people have to communicate and work together. And we had some crystals spawning and we started shooting them. Sometimes we could damage them, sometimes we couldn't. It was really frustrating. It really puzzled us for a long time until we realised that you need someone with the buff to shoot it and someone without the buff to shoot it. So once we sussed that out, we realised we need to split into teams, each with one person with the buff and one person without the buff. And that again permeates throughout the raid. In each stage of the raid you really need to do that. So the first part of the raid really does do a good job of getting you into the mechanics of the raid and allowing you to figure out the rest of it. Now when you have the buff you can damage certain enemies. I think when you've got the buff you can shoot the witches and the knights, but if you haven't got the buff you can shoot the thrall and the acolytes. So that is kind of cool because it means you have to rely on your teammates. You can't just sort of go off and do your own thing. Now the way we beat the first stage is, after some experimentation trying different things, we actually realised it was a good idea to have 3 warlocks in the team, each with the Well of Radiance. And then what we did is we put a Well of Radiance near the purple ball, not too close because you could actually destroy the purple ball quite easily, but close enough it was easy to go to the purple ball when we needed to swap the buffs. Because if you don't do that before the 60-second runs out, then the people will get the Witch's Curse and die. So basically the 3 warlocks would take turns to put down Wells of Radiance. We'd all stand in that Well of Radiance shooting enemies. Some of us obviously would be shooting certain enemies and others would be shooting other enemies. Again, you just stay in the Wells of Radiance. They will keep you alive because they will give you a damage buff, also a healing buff, and they last quite a long time as well. Now periodically there will be a chime noise and crystals will appear, and you'll have to go off in your teams of 2, one to the left side, one to the right side and one team in the middle to destroy your crystals. There'll be 3 of them. They do move around from different places, and we had different call outs of different areas. On the left side there was a crystal we called the Candlestick Crystal, and there was the Gazebo Crystal we called it, just so that when you see the crystal you can easily identify where your teammate needs to go, because both of you, obviously one with the buff and without the buff, needs to shoot it. So then you just keep doing that, just waves of crystals, waves of ogres, everyone just standing in these Wells of Radiance. Once you finish that stage you then move on to the jumping puzzle. There are platforms that appear, and again there are crystals, and some of the crystals are in bubbles, so you actually have to go into the bubble to actually melee or shoot it. And again this introduces you to another mechanic that will be later on in the boss stage. Again, staying in teams of 2 helps, and you have people say take the left bubble crystal, people take the right bubble crystal, and then you will get to checkpoints where you can swap the purple balls, where you can swap the buffs. And you have to keep moving forward because platforms do disappear. It's an okay jumping puzzle. I don't think it's that particularly memorable, like it's serviceable. And the first stage, again, it's good for teaching you the mechanics, but subsequent playthroughs, it does get a bit not monotonous, but I mean it's okay, but it's not exactly the most memorable part of a raid. But Bungie have definitely saved the best till last, because the final boss is really well done. It's superb, one of the best bosses I think in any raid, and it's definitely the main reason to actually attempt this raid. Now when you get to the final boss arena, it's really impressive, it's really well done, the graphics are excellent. Bungie have done a fantastic job with it. It kind of reminded me of The Hobbit, the film, where you had that dragon and he's underneath all that gold in that treasure room. Now the final boss is actually a 2-phase affair. There's like a mini boss and he runs around in a bubble and he has 2 axes, and we called him the Choppy Choppy. And once you kill the mini boss, you go on to the second stage where you fight the huge big final boss. Okay, so tips for the final boss. The biggest tip I can give you is to swap the blessing whenever you can. Even if you've got like 50 or 40 seconds left. If you get the opportunity, if there's a lull in the action, if you're near the orb, you're both there, just swap it. Because that will take the pressure off. The last thing you need is to be worrying about having to swap the blessing when there's ogres running riot, or whether there's a crystal that just spawned. And prioritize the crystals. Like if you're worried about what do we do? Do we swap the blessing? Do we tackle with the enemies? If there's a crystal up, that should be your priority, because if you don't get that crystal, it's going to be a team wipe. Now also dealing with the ogres as quickly as possible. Now the ogres can be quite lethal. People can get caught in the open and destroyed by the ogres, so you need to deal with them as quickly as possible. So my advice is to have heavy weapons and supers that can deal with those ogres quickly. I was running a hunter and I used the Celestial Nighthawk helmet with golden gun, so I could literally destroy the ogre as soon as it appeared. Another good tip is for boss damage, everybody use Outbreak Prime. If everyone's got the Outbreak Prime and they're shooting the boss, then the nanites will build up and do extra damage. And then you can save your heavy weapons and supers for the ogres and the witches when they spawn. Another good tip is to get off the ground. The Choppy Choppy, the mini boss with the axes, he can't get you if you're actually off the ground. There's these pyramid structures with flat tops you can stand on. And of course when you're on those structures, the Thrall can't get you as well. Now when you fight the mini boss, the arena will split into 3 sections. There will be green walls dividing each section. Now one section will have the well, so someone can get the blessing. And the idea is to pass the blessing from section to section via the purple orbs. And as you do that, the green walls will disappear, and eventually you'll be able to get the blessing into the section with the mini boss. And at that stage you should have 3 people with the blessing and 3 people without. Now the people with the blessing will not be able to damage the boss, but you need those people to get the boss's shield down. So what you do is you get one person with the blessing and one person without to melee the boss, get his little spherical shield down, then you can DPS him. And then when his shield goes back up, you get another person with the blessing to melee him and someone without. Shield goes down again, more DPS, and of course then you get the third person, the last person with the blessing to get the shield down again. Now be careful, because if people with the blessing are too close to the mini boss when his shield goes down, there's an area of effect that will remove the blessing for everyone. So the people that have the blessing, that are waiting their turn to melee the mini boss, keep well away, and of course you can't damage the boss while you have the blessing. So gradually what you'll find is you will do more and more damage with each DPS phase. Now again, Well of Radiance is excellent here. Get your warlocks putting down wells of radiance to give you the damage buff, and also a shield to protect you from the Thrall. If you can put the Well of Radiance on a platform that you can all stand on to keep away from the Thrall, that's a good idea, because even though the Thrall won't actually kill you in the Well of Radiance, they can throw off your aim. Now another big tip is for the Warlocks to have Lunification boots, because then you don't have to reload your Outbreak Primes and you can just DPS the hell out of the boss. Now when you get to the final boss, there will be 3 big bosses, and you will have the little mini bosses as well, Choppy Choppies. You will have the crystals. You won't have any walls, there won't be 3 actual areas anymore, but there will still be the purple balls for swapping your buffs. So you still need to be in teams of 2 in each area. Now the big bosses, the 3 big bosses, will be shooting fireballs out of their hands. These fireballs move quite slowly, so you can avoid them quite easily as long as you keep moving. You can even stand at the feet of the bosses and they can't get you then. Now crystals will spawn in a clockwise fashion, so if you're in one area and you get your crystal, then you can warn the people sort of clockwise to you in the next section that they're going to get their crystal in approximately like 30 seconds, so you can give each other the heads up. Now an interesting mechanic is that the big boss will get a little mini boss to spawn, a little Choppy Choppy. So you need to actually deal with that Choppy Choppy. Like if you're in your area, one person with the buff and without the buff, you melee him, get his shield down, and he will be stunned. And then the big boss's hand will grow green, and you can actually pre-fire on the hand with your Outbreak Prime to get nanites on the hand. So as soon as it goes green, it will be damaged. Then the big boss will pull out a huge axe and destroy the little mini boss. Now this behaviour really doesn't make any sense to me. Why would the big boss want to kill the little mini boss? It's not like you're standing next to the mini boss and the big boss is trying to kill you and inadvertently kill the mini boss. You can actually shoot that green hand from miles away and the big boss will still slam down that axe. And also when you take down the mini boss's shield at that point, he stuns. Why then? At no other point does he do that. It's inconsistent. It all seems a bit contrived. I know the whole thing's contrived, obviously it's a game, but ultimately I do like the behaviours of the enemies to be sort of logical and consistent. Now once you've all killed your little mini Choppy Choppy mini boss, you'll get to a point where the big bosses, the 3 of them, will raise their hands in the air, they'll go green, and each team should take a left and a right hand, shoot those hands, and then you shoot him in the head, and then 2 of the bosses will disappear and you'll be left with one, the real boss, and then you all group up to do damage to the real boss. Now a big tip here is before you go into the DPS phase is to go to the nearest purple ball in that section and all swap the buff together. Now once you've finished doing DPS to the boss, go back to the same purple ball and all swap again. If you don't do that, what you'll find is people will have to peel off to swap the buff and you'll do a lot less damage. Now using Outbreaks and Wells of Radiance and Lunification boots, you should be able to do the boss in 2 phases no problem. People are even 1 phasing him. Okay, so as you've heard, there's a lot of mechanics to the final boss. Kind of reminded me of the Last Wish raid. Lots and lots of mechanics, and that's cool, you know, it's well done, and I do really like the buff swapping mechanic. I think it works really well. It keeps people engaged, constantly communicating. There's so much going on with the crystals and all the enemies spawning. Some of them, you know, obviously you can't kill all of them, you have to rely on your teammate. Sometimes when you melee the Choppy Choppy, the guy with the buff will lose it, so then you have to get someone from another section to shoot your purple ball to give you the buff back. So you're communicating as teams of 2 and collectively, and yeah, it's a great experience. It's a great raid, and of course because you're all working together, when you finally do kill the boss, it is a fantastic feeling. The buff swapping mechanic does make the raid feel quite unique, and that's one of the things I love about Bungie raids, is they all do feel different. Bungie go out their way to give us different experiences, and I really appreciate that. Now with regard to the fun factor, obviously that's subjective. Personally, I like mechanics in the raid, like complex mechanics. It does give you a good sense of achievement when you figure it out, but I do like the action to be broken up with more sort of fun sections. Now one of my favourite parts in any raid was the Wrath of the Machine raid, when you had to repair the siege machine when it broke down on top of the wall, and you each had to carry parts for the siege machine, and you kept dropping them and your mates would have to pick them up. That was really fun. I like the tomb ships in King's Fall raid in Destiny 1. I know a lot of people didn't. I liked in Crota's End running the lamps at the start, running in the darkness with your friends. It was just chaotic, it was organised chaos, but it's great fun. And I kind of miss that from Destiny 2 raids. Now with the Last Wish raid, I loved the raid, but it did feel like a boss rush mode. We just went from arena to arena really. It was superbly done, but I'm not sure it was like fun. It was quite stressful. In fact, my favourite part of the Last Wish raid was when you carry the Heart of Riven and you sort of take turns and you drop it and you have to pick it up. That was really good fun, and I'd like more of that in Destiny 2 raids. Now I know I am referencing fun bits from full-size raids, but even the Scourge of the Past mini raid had a fun little sparrow racing section in it, and I think that's what's missing from the Crown of Sorrow. Just a nice little fun section just to break it up a bit. Now with the Shadowkeep expansion, we're going to get a full raid, Garden of Salvation, and I really hope that Bungie put some fun sections into that. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Crown of Sorrow. I definitely advise you to give it a go, it's definitely worth your time. I hope you've picked up a few tips along the way that may be useful to you as well if you haven't defeated this raid already, and I'll see you in the next video, hopefully. Goodbye.